Now let's turn our attention to basic and dynamic disks. Now what we're really talking about here is the disk type, and this is also known as the storage type. So if you see any of those terms, they're talking about this decision about whether we're going to use a basic or a dynamic disk. And this is one of those topics, I don't know if it's this way for you, but I can never really remember the differences between these things, and I have to always go look them up, and then it's just kind of irritating. But this really refers to the method that's used to structure the disk and its contents and how it's used. Now, Windows Server really offers four options. They offer the basic disk, the dynamic disk, a removable disk, and a virtual disk. Now, a removable disk is pretty straightforward, right? It's anything that can be removed. It's not permanently attached storage to the server. And then a virtual disk, well, it's a virtual disk, and we'll talk about Hyper-V and virtualization later on in the course. So really what we're going to concentrate on right now is this basic and dynamic disk, because this is what they really seem to pound on this exam. So let's start off with the basic disk. Now the basic disk, when I set up a disk and I use the basic disk type, this is the same structure as earlier versions of Windows OS. This has been around for a long time. This supports volumes on, watch the word here, single disk and single partition only. So I can create volumes on a single disk and partition only, and I can create 4 primary partitions, or, where have you seen this before, 3 primary partitions and 1 extended. Then I can have multiple logical drives in an extended partition. Trust me, you're going to know that before you leave this course, right? Now, a primary partition, by the way, is one that can contain only 1 logical drive. Now, the basic disk also, very important here, contains no fault tolerance from Windows OS. In other words, it just kind of runs. It'll put your data there. If you lose your data, too bad. If you want fault tolerance, you're going to have to get some sort of external disk controller, some sort of external system, but you won't see questions about any kind of external system for disk controllers on the exam. Now, a basic disk, though, does support booting to different operating systems that you want to store these in different partitions. So let's say I want to put Windows Server 2003 in one partition, Windows Server 2012 in another one, and when I boot the machine up, get a choice, and we get what's called a boot menu. We can do that with a basic disk. Now, a basic disk is very reliable in storage area network or SAN configurations. And again, let me back up here. Microsoft is not going to ask you a lot of technical questions about storage area networks, about using them. You could see them mentioned, but you don't have to be a SAN expert to pass this exam. Now, here's the main thing about basic and dynamic disk that you tend to see on the exam. To convert from a basic to a dynamic is really a mouse click. Now, you don't suffer any data loss. It's relatively painless. It's quick. However, if you want to convert from a dynamic back to a basic, then it's a little more involved. The process of converting from dynamic to basic is going to destroy all the data on the disk, which means you'll have to back it up, then convert it, then replace your data. I don't know if that makes you nervous, but it really makes me nervous, especially on Friday afternoons. Now let's talk about the dynamic disk. Now with a dynamic disk, this actually extends the Windows disk functionality when you're using multiple disks in your Windows Server. You can host volumes that span multiple partitions and disks. Keep in mind, basic is all about those single partitions and disks. Dynamics can build fault-tolerant volumes when a RAID controller is not available. Now, there's an easier way to say this in English, and let me say it this way. Dynamic disks can be used to build software-based RAID solutions with functionalities that are built into Windows Server. So you don't need an external RAID controller or any kind of RAID controller added to your server to have some fault-tolerant volumes. Now, a dynamic disk, also minor thing, but watch for this on the exam, requires fewer restarts after you make configuration changes. It's managed by the OS using the Virtual Disk Service or the VDS. And watch for this one, dynamic disks are being replaced by the new storage spaces functionality in Windows Server 2012. So if you get a question on the exam between basic or dynamic disks, just look at the requirements of how they're going to use the data, how they're trying to organize things, and choose between basic or dynamic. If you get a question on there between basic, dynamic, and storage spaces, be very careful. Storage spaces is the hot new technology. It is eventually going to replace dynamic disks, so it could be one of the correct answers. So just kind of watch for that. But that's the difference, and I was going to say that's the basics on basic and dynamic disk, but I was afraid that would confuse you, so I won't say it. How about that? But that's the 50,000-foot view, the information you need to be aware of to pick your way through these questions and the real world concerning basic and dynamic disks.